I always start welcoming everyone in my language, and excuse my students, I know they've heard this 1,000 times already, but this is just the way I do things. So in my native Tongan language, our greeting word is maloelele. Can you say that? Say that one more time. That sounds a little more indigenous Tongans here. Okay. Maloelele. Nice, nice. Okay, let me break it down for you. Linguistics is a part of anthropology. So it's nice to learn new words in another language. So malolele literally means, malo means thank you. Okay, like in Hawaiian, mahalo. Okay. Malo means thank you, and lele means good. Okay, so we dismiss asking you how you are. We just get to the point that we are glad and happy that you are good, and that you are present. And then we will just assume that because you're present, you must be doing well. So anyway, so we are glad that you are here. Thank you. Thank you for being well and healthy and being good to be here tonight with us. My name is Dr. Lynette Suliana Sikahema Finau. I am originally from the island kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific. We're neighboring islands with the beautiful island of Fiji and Samoa, south of New Zealand. It is one of the 6 Polynesian islands in the South Pacific. And my family immigrated here when I was 7 years old, and I did not know a word of English. So for my grandparents and even my parents would be shocked to see me speaking English, and especially even teaching especially here at BYU. So I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity and the privilege of being in the classroom and learning and teaching and learning together with students. I am the instructor for the Anthropology 499 senior thesis class. These are our seniors who are completing their capstone, basically writing their thesis in order to graduate. Now, in the anthropology department, in order to receive your degree, a requirement to receive their anthropology degree is that they have to conduct field work. And they are ethnographers, and they travel, they leave the country, some of them leave the country, some of them conduct their work here locally. But they do spend 8 weeks, 2.5 months, that's a long time. And they go overseas. The majority of our students, all of them went overseas except for one. Is that correct? Yeah, one of our students here just went to Provo, just down the street. Yeah, you can conduct field work anywhere. But our students, our seniors here, travel to Japan and Korea, Belfast, Ireland, and anywhere else did I miss? Yeah. And we're really, really proud of the work that they did. Now, being out in the field, I always tell my students that doing field work, because that is ethnography, you are living, you have to live in the community and participate and be a part of the community. It's like missionary work. And I thought, my goodness, yeah, we have a lot of ethnographers. I think every student that serves a mission, everyone that serves a mission, I'm going to think that they are ethnographers as well. They travel, they live amongst the people for 2 years, 1.5 years. Our students are only there for 8 weeks, but they are there and they collect their data through participant observation and interviews. And when they collect their data, when they are done, they come home and they have to take my class to write their field studies in a thesis format. And so this is the hard part right here, is having to write it out and put everything on paper. So they worked really, really hard, and I'm proud and privileged to be working alongside them so that they can complete their thesis. Part of the completion of this class is having to present to their families, friends, to the community, to our distinguished faculties who are here, and then they are ready to tackle the world and we'll have more anthropologists out there, and we need more. We need a lot of anthropologists out there. Okay, so we will go ahead and start. Let me just go over real quick how this will work. I think all of you might have your our program. Okay, and it is outlined this way. As you notice that our presenters are in twos. Okay, each presenter will present for 10 minutes. They know it because we practiced and rehearsed, and they will not use up a lot of time. 10 minutes. They each have 10 minutes each to present. And then when they are done, the two of them will come up here to the front, and then 10 minutes of Q&A. So I invite you all to listen and enjoy it. Listen with your heart, with your mind. And if you have any questions, you do have the opportunity to ask questions. So 10 minutes each, and then 10 minutes together of Q&A. So altogether, it's about a half hour per duo. Does that make sense? Okay. After that, we do have some refreshments. Okay. You have provided some cookies and refreshments here, and I'll just leave it up here on top of the piano. And so when we transition to the next duo, then that is the time to come up here, and please help yourself with cookies as the next presenters prepare. Okay, I will keep checks all. And presenters, are we ready? Okay, of course they are. All right, so our first presenter tonight, it is Mr. Joshua Ray. Joshua, I never knew how to pronounce your name, your last name. That's what I thought, okay. Okay, let me say that again. I love names, so let me say that again. Joshua Ray Booher, and he went to Belfast, Ireland. And his presentation is titled The Third Thing, Manufacturing Indifference Beyond the Binary Belfast. All right, let's welcome Dr.
Is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Okay, so like Dr. Pina said, last summer I was actually in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I was studying what is called the third thing. So this is a group of musicians who transcend the community boundaries within Belfast and reject the dialogue of identity within Northern Ireland. So I spent 20 hours a week with these musicians, going to concerts, venues, all over Northern Ireland. I drank over 8 gallons of non-alcoholic beer. I actually ended up being in over 20 different venues and talked with over 75 musicians. I used an ethnographic approach with my research, which meant, I did a lot of interviews. I did a lot of ethnographic film. And so you're going to see a lot of that today. A lot of my data actually pulls from the film that I took in Northern Ireland. So it's going to play in the background as I go through, and there's a section in the end that I'll explain more about, but you'll see kind of some of the interlocutors that I had, but also some of kind of the contrary to the third thing, but I'll explain it as we go. So, I also use deep hanging out, which is a term that Gertz talks about. It's basically just hanging out in these venues, talking with musicians. So on one of these occasions, I was at an open mic night and I introduced myself to this musician, and she turned to me and she said, so you're looking at why we're so divided from the Troubles, because Belfast is more than that. Belfast is more than the Troubles, and here we are not that. Her position defines her community as distinct and separate from both the Troubles and the traditional identities of Northern Ireland. This time of the Troubles was a period of conflict that started in 1968, where Irish Republicans fought for a united Ireland against Protestant loyalists who defended Queen and country. Through bombings, massacres, assassinations, and other violent actions, the lives of over 3,500 people were claimed. Through this feud of sectarian violence, it both reinforced the communities within Northern Ireland and also forced individuals onto either side of this division. So the PUL, Protestant Unionist Loyalist Community, and the RIC, Republican Irish Nationalist Community, are the communities which define against each other in Northern Ireland. In a process that has been broadly described as manufacturing difference, the idea that one is the intrinsic enemy and opposite to the other. So in 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and this created a period of ostensible peace, which goes on till today. But there's actually more segregation and divisions between these communities. So these are some peace walls within Northern Ireland. They're actually constructed after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement and stand to divide these communities within Belfast. So beyond the physical divisions, these groups actually differentiate in other ways as well. So this is a quote from Clifford Geertz. And these threads that are within Northern Ireland, I recognize as both green and orange. That's what suspends and defines the communities, the identities, and the people within Belfast. But it wasn't all of that. So I actually found that within my research, these musicians weren't about the green and the orange. They were about being something else, being something other than what was. They actually focused on manufacturing indifference, coming together, playing music, being in the spaces, helping one another out. And academics often focus on being either green or orange, but I like to focus on the white. It's the third thing, the thing that's not in between as a liminal state, but as an exterior to this Catholic and Protestant division. So this dichotomy within Belfast is, I'm going to actually pull up a map here and explain it, but it's more than like this ethno-religious tension, but people within Belfast are looking past that. So the green represents the Catholic areas, the orange is the Protestant areas, and then you see all of these dots on here. These are the venues that I went to. This is just outside of Belfast in a town called Bangor, and it's majority Protestant. So what's interesting about this is that I found that the musicians that I was talking to, I talked to in all of these different venues. So I would be in minority Catholic, like this area over here, and I'd find the same musicians over here. This is actually a really cool venue that I'll talk about later on. It's Philophobo. I actually saw a band called Kneecap there who has a very provocative Irish image. And then the two musicians that played here, there was a Catholic and then there was a Protestant musician, by birth and growing up. But they actually both were at the concert that I went to here, which is the Catholic West Belfast Arts Festival. And so there's a lot of really interesting ways that these musicians are actually transcending these boundaries, both in a physical way, but also in an ideological way, the way that they actually see their own Belfast. But I found that also the groups that don't really conform to these broader themes, these communities of Catholic and Protestant, they don't really get discussed when talking about this dialogue of identity within Belfast. So like I said, the third thing, the intrinsic other to the binary, is the space that transcends these boundaries a lot. But music also plays an important role within these identities, both Catholic and Protestant. So you have groups that focus on promoting their identities. They really try to focus on, so the band, like I said before, Kneecap, focuses on displaying an Irish image. And then there's also Protestant flute bands who focus on presenting this British, this Protestant image. And they play, there's a clip later on that you'll see where they're playing on the 12th of July, which is a Protestant holiday where they actually march and parade around Belfast and play their songs. But that's not exactly the space that is there, all the time. The musicians that I met are playing every time. And it's really interesting because some of the academics, like there's an article titled Music, Youth, and Peace Building, which says that the music scene focuses on having youth build this cross-community divide, transgress this and like become more than it through shared meaning making between these groups, through helping them build this self-esteem and seeing others' points of view. But also, he says in the article that by participating in the music scene, they're not rioting, they're not creating these sectarian violent acts. And I think that this idea really reduces the third thing and the music scene to the exact framework that they're trying to reject. So music, like I was saying before, it's the space that's beyond this divide. It's the space which the individual can express themselves in better ways. This is a quote that I found.
The music side of and you kind of like think of any band and be like, oh, they're mostly Protestant languages are all kind of the entertainment. So I think that's like there's no education type of line. I just think people like I think because the music has nothing to do with like anything like that as well. It's like hard, it's like it's just a whole different universe. Like it's not concerned with that at all. Like if you're playing like specifically like Irish music or something like that, I don't factor in.
Just never think about music in that way. It's always just sat outside of all that. I would say music is a good space for like cross community, friendships and relationships. Simply because it's not a space, it's divided by that. It just has always been separate. And in some ways it's been used as a rebellion against what's happening. Like if you look at it like the scene in the 80s, like the punk scene in the 80s, like they were like, rioting on the streets, singing at the top of their lungs, like refusing to be boxed and refusing to accept that reality.
So the third thing today, it's made up of musicians who look to transcend these boundaries. They want to become more than this Catholic and Protestant divide. They look to dissociate their space from these broader themes. Like my friend said, the punk scene really fostered this space that you see today. They emerged during the Troubles. They were anti-sectarian. They just were focused on rebelling against all of the structure and framework that was in Belfast. And they were focused on being this group that was just there to play music. Didn't matter where you were from, what side of the divide, where you were going home to that night. As long as you were there and present, you were part of this third thing. You were part of that group. And today, these musicians, they do what I like to call genre bending. And so I'd go to a concert and then you have punk band that's opening up for a folk band. Those two don't really go together anywhere else. But in Northern Ireland, that's what they focus on. They're just together. They're just playing music and playing music together. And a lot of the time that I was there, all these musicians would say, we're really a DIY community. We're small, but we always work together. I'll play on his album, we'll play on my album. We're actually going to make a band later. We have this idea for a new genre we want to try out. We want to play this, in this venue together, or we're just going to do open mic nights together. And these systems of exchanges of just being together and putting their talent, their music together is another way where they just rejected these divisions that would have, placed them into different school systems, different, communities growing up. A lot of these people wouldn't have even crossed paths if it weren't for some of the music spaces that have been created nowadays. And so the musicians have pushed past this divide between these communities, these identities, because this division is exhausting for them. It's always pushing them into either being Protestant or Catholic. And so they focused on making music together and displaying this broader theme of unity and breaking this binary Belfast. So that's the third thing. I'd like to thank, all the mentors and the people that helped me out. Dr. Hickman, everybody who came to field school with me, Rufus. So that's the third thing. If you have any questions afterwards, please come up to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Beautiful job. All right, our next presenter is Samantha Elmer. She too also went to Belfast, Ireland. And her presentation is titled Violent Peace, the role of bonfires in maintaining loyalist communities in Northern Ireland.
All right, so I am Samantha Elmer. I conducted my research in Northern Ireland last summer. So today I'll be presenting on how on the role of bonfires in maintaining loyalist communities. So Ireland is marked by division. So it goes all the way back to the Williamite Wars and also during the Troubles, as Josh has touched on. So Northern Ireland has a division, to put it simply, between Catholics and Protestants, or loyalists, nationalists. So as you can see by this map, Northern Ireland is in the field. And Northern Ireland today still is divided among these with peace walls and distinctions such as that. So bonfires are an important part of loyalist culture. Traditionally, bonfires symbolize Protestantism and loyalism, which commemorate the victory of the Battle of the Boyne in 1960. So King William's arrival into Belfast, which marked British rule in Northern Ireland. So bonfires are typically perceived as sectarian and anti-Catholic by burning of effigies, photographs of Irish politicians, and then the burning of the tricolored flag. As you can see in that picture up there, there's a tricolored flag being burned on top of a bonfire. So, and this next sequence is something I put together. It is an interview with a UDA leader and ex-prisoner.
There's a conservative campaign in media, certainly within certain elements of nationalism, to demonize loyalist Protestant culture, and particularly bonfires. They've built up over the years. But, you know, Republicans will tell us, well, we don't have bonfires. Well, my answer to that is, I'm not concerned whether you have a bonfire or not. You don't understand what a bonfire means to the DUL community, and it means everything.
So as Colin said, bonfires mean everything to the loyalist community. So today I claim that bonfires are a unifying force that, amidst their violence or their violent nature, play a crucial role in maintaining the cohesion and cultural identity of loyalist communities in Northern Ireland. So I conducted my research through participant observation and interviews. I focused on bonfire sites around Belfast, but specifically in two main sites outside of Belfast. So Larne, the Craigie Hill bonfire, which is a loyalist area and mostly run by a UDA paramilitary group, which is the Ulster Defence Association. And then the Portadown bonfire was also a loyalist area and mostly run by the UBF, or the Ulster Volunteer Force. So this next sequence will illustrate how young people, how they see loyalism and how paramilitary groups are prevalent.
If you were to go, you know, around the different bonfires on the 11th night in the different districts, they will reflect the loyalties of what the particular loyalist family group is doing. We have UDA, we have UDA.
Like that one when the trouble was on, like they were still excited having the guns. This would be IRA or something. The CDIRA on. They can walk for the guns anywhere. Because they are so scared that we're gonna come and we're gonna batter them. Like we're gonna get thrown on their in 2018 there were 3 IRA here in Robison jail, but they were sniping from places and just killing them with it.
It adds to the complexity of it. And you don't just look at this based on the context of the Catholic Protestant faith. organizations, like you always have leaders in the context of living heaven, but within two parliamentary organizations, who like to keep a sort of control within their areas. They don't think it's necessarily that bad of a thing. And they continue to have a great sectarian attitudes because it continues to give them the facade of new do this.
So as you can see, loyalism is very important to young people. They're very passionate about it. As you can see in that video, those that I was talking to, I met them outside of the town or in the town of Larne near the bonfire site. And it didn't take much for them to start explaining everything that they knew about Protestant and loyalist culture. And they offered to take us around the whole site and show us everything that they knew. And so they knew a lot about their history and a lot about loyalism. So a lot of young people are familiar with violence and how it has maintained and impacted their community. As you can see, those young kids were very aware of the violence that had happened in their past. So bonfires, they're a symbol that strengthen this collective identity. So bonfires are portrayed as violent, but how can that violence also bring peace and collective to a community? This sequence, it will illustrate, well, it is what went down on the night of the Portadown bonfire. And you will see an effigy of Lord Lundy, a Protestant trader, who will be paraded around and ultimately burned. We'll also be hearing pro-UDA chants and anti-Catholic chants.
The only people that can harm themselves, and even there, they're always really aware of people who do them.
Violence kept us together, but the peace is torn us apart.
So the burning of Lord Lundy, while this was a violent act, the community was all centered around this exact thing. The community is coming together around this act of violence. So, and as Jackie said, violence has kept us together, but peace has torn us apart. So to conclude, without bonfires, the loyalist community would greatly suffer in the way that they don't have this uniting thing that they are all with. One of the, a member of the Protestant community that we had interviewed was talking about bonfires and how he didn't want them to go away and how people were trying to take them away from them, like the government and things. And he was saying it would be really sad for them to lose the bonfires. And if they tried to take it away, we would just build it twice as high next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. So Josh, if you could join Samantha in front, and we will have 10 minutes of Q&A. Okay, we'll start with our faculty.
I'll try to be loud enough. Terrific. Both of those were really great. Outstanding use of the imagery rolling. I noticed the first few, Josh, having it roll, sort of passive imagery. That's really good. A specific question for Josh, and we've talked a little bit about your stuff before. So third thing, obviously it can't be sui generis. Can't just like, well, we just emerge from ourselves. So what are they being? What are they becoming? So in rejecting Protestantism, in Catholicism. Code words. Are they being, what is it that they are drawing from and performing and being? Do you see any?
So
Broader,
I think that the word of community, the word of identity is so stigmatized that they look to just not being that. I mean, in all of the quotes, they're like, no, we're not tied to identity. This is not identity, even though, you know, it is, but they're just trying to put that stigma to the side. They're trying to be redefined. And in doing so, it's kind of just removing definition from their own perspective, from within. And that's kind of the stance that they've taken, is just being not that. Like we can be anything else. So they focus on being really open and accepting of everybody. A lot of people talked about how progressive they are. And so a lot of those minority groups also thrive within. So there was like, I mean, a majority of the people that I met were part of the LGBTQ plus community. A lot of the other communities, there's a lot of immigrants who have been trying to put their feet into the music scene. They're just anything but what Belfast has been known for.
yeah, you made that really clear. What I'm wondering, that's their ideology.
Yeah.
But what I'm suggesting is, that is an ideology. They can't draw from nothing. They can't sprout from the mind of Zeus pure. What made me think of this was the hip hop music. I'm wondering if there's, and it sounded like it with some of the things you were just saying, are they enacting something that looks more like globalism?
I think in a way they are, but not everybody that I met would have displayed that. So I have to think about it a little bit more and try to think about that, but I think for the most part, these musicians across the board with what they're going to become. Some people said that they're making a new Belfast. They're just being unified. They're being, yeah, I think to a degree, some musicians were.
Thank you.
Go first.
Oh, okay. I'll just say it for Samantha, Sam. I really liked your presentation. I have a question. So your claim is that bonfires help make community for the Protestant group, like the Loyalist group, because of the violence. Did you see something, I guess, similar within, like for the Catholic group while in Ireland?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we didn't have much access, I guess, to that, the Catholic side. One, they just seemed much less willing to talk, and we were also just in a majority Protestant area. Catholics do have bonfires in their own communities, I think in November, I think. So they do have bonfires, but they're not in the same way that these ones are, I guess. So I think there definitely are things for sure, and I think it also showed in some of the footage that Josh showed of those Irish concerts, or people that were into that. So yeah, not as much with my own research, but it does exist. I just can't say for sure since I wasn't there. So thank you.
If I could add to that, maybe I'll just throw out a question for each of you, because and let you do what you can with it. But for Sam, kind of building on that, you close your talk with something like, without bonfires, the Loyalist community would greatly suffer. And expounding on that, I guess I'm just wondering, to what extent are you pointing to that as an ideology of the community that you studied, or as, I guess, your dispassionate ethnographic analysis of a dynamic? Because I think what you mean by when you say that, I guess my real question is, what's the moral upshot of your analysis? Because in fact, bonfires and parades and flags are some of the most contested public policies in Northern Irish society. And, ethnographers weighing in is a critical piece to really unpacking and understanding. So I guess I'm wondering what you see as the moral upshot to that is. And I think that would hinge on maybe clarifying a little bit whether, without bonfires, the Loyalist community would greatly suffer is an ideology that you're pointing to, or a dynamic that you're pointing to as an anthropologist saying, no, this community really would, like this bonfires are doing something productive that are helping a community that is, you know, socioeconomic difficulties and so on, like stay together.
Yeah, I think it's something that I as an anthropologist am looking at. So, definitely just from my observations, I've just noticed like with like these communities come together for this bonfire. They prepare for months and months in advance. They've already started preparing, like they started back in like March for the one this year, for July. So it's just a big part of their towns. It's just how they come together. This whole, for example, Larne, where the Craigie Hill bonfire was, all of these houses surround this one estate and with such like a big field of grass, and that's like their designated site for bonfires every year. It's the same thing in other communities as well. And so, and often something that I didn't mention in my presentation was those children, they are very much involved within that community in the bonfire building. They have like a special kids bonfire that they build every year. That's a lot smaller than the 210-foot tall one. But they build that one. And so they are also like children of bonfire builders. And so like all of these things are very much like intertwined, like UDA, paramilitary, and bonfire building. They very much are like the core of their community. So
If I could parlay that into my question for Josh, like that was really powerful. The statement from like, 10-year-old kids about imagining that the ethno-national other is perennially propped atop towers with sniper rifles or, carrying around guns ready to shoot them at any moment is really powerful in terms of like the intergenerational perpetuation of ethno-national identity and the prospect of violence. So kind of tying that into the notion of manufacturing indifference is kind of, and what you're pointing to with what the music scene is trying to do, almost to counteract the very thing that you're pointing to is happening in these working class communities. I guess the question is, to what extent is manufacturing indifference within the music scene something about which there actually is contestation and debate? So in other words, could you see Kneecap, the provocative, Irish ethno-nationalist rap band where the DJ wears a tricolor balaclava? Are they actually engaged in some version of manufacturing indifference? Because on the surface, they're rapping in Irish and they're, have song titles like "Get Your Brits Out," right? Like getting the British out of the island and so on. But like, I guess I just wonder whether or not provocative groups like Kneecap might actually be on somewhat the same wavelength as like, your people who are actually saying, no, this is an anti-sectarian space where we're like the punk scene in the 80s. We're marching against sectarianism. I don't know.
Yeah, so Kneecap actually came out with a film not too long ago. And the very first intro of the film is like archival footage of the Troubles. And then right after that, they're like, this is Belfast. And they're like, actually, this is Belfast. And it cuts to just everyday life. It cuts to, everyday life for them and just like what we call in film the B-roll of Belfast. It's just average. It's normal. It's not bombs and fires. And so to an extent they are, because they want to show that it's, even though they do have a provocative image, they wear the tricolor balaclava, but it's not as a tribute to the IRA or to that time period. It's kind of playing off of that, saying we can redefine these things. They've been labeled a lot of times as this very provocative IRA supporters, IRA cheerleaders, but that's not really what they're doing. That's how they get a lot of attention. And they say that they're trying to support the Irish language, which is a dying language. They're trying to keep that alive, but also they're just making music. They're just a bunch of, yeah.
Are they manufacturing indifference? I guess that's the question.
I'd say in their own way, they are manufacturing indifference for them. Yes, but for those that are, from the Protestant community, we don't always see them as manufacturing indifference. And I think that some of those values of like, some of those ideologies where people say that they're supporting the IRA or supporting these things from a Protestant side. We saw that some of these Protestants think that, you know, these people are standing on top of buildings, right? So some people don't see it that way, but within the third thing, yes, to a degree.
Okay, we have time for one more question, Dr. Thompson.
So just a quick comment for Josh and then a question for Samantha. For Josh, you described indifference and then you described something that sounded to me like caring. So just something to think about is like indifference. Is it really indifference? Is there not some community building that's happening there? You don't have to respond to that. Samantha, I'm wondering about the determinism, the semiotic, what I call like a semiotic determinism. Why does it have to be fire? Like, are there not other things that this community could rally around that could be annual events of doing something? Why? You said it, you're making a really strong statement here saying it's got to be fire. It has to be not just fire, but it's got to be the massive fire. Nothing else could substitute for it. Why?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first, like the bonfires date back to the Battle of the Moines, and they say that traditionally, like they claim that they had beacons on the hills that were welcoming King William into their land. So that's where it originated from. However, over the years, they've adopted that as like fire. This is it. However, recently they have been trying to get rid of bonfires or change them in a way. So one effort has been with these beacons. So they're provided by the government and they are just smaller, little portable fires like that they bring in on trailers for different communities. And in hopes to reduce like environment, to help the environment, and then also to help there be less violence, because they don't want people building these giant bonfires, getting injured, because there's been some fatalities in years past of people dying, falling off of them, getting burned. Then of course with like the Catholic side of things, a lot of Catholics avoid them, of course. And so I think fire is very much just like, it's just a core part of a lot of cultures, and this one especially. I think one of the loyalists leaders that I interviewed, we asked them like, what do you think about these beacon fires? And they just laughed and were like, we hate them. Like, we need these big fires. Like, this is what we do. This is our culture. Like, so they don't even like want to entertain the idea of something else, let alone a smaller. So.
All right, thank you. How about a big hand for Joshua and Samantha? Great job. Okay, thank you for your questions and thank you, Joshua and Samantha. So this is your time to grab some refreshments as our next two presenters prepare. So come on up here, help yourself.
Right, it's her saying it. Sorry.
Like the same.
So but that's a complicated thing, right? Is there the very attitude, like
About that.
the thing is that like Provo said whole thing in the Sundance. Standing there, because like they're Republican. For years, it's like if you're a Provo, you're one of the dudes fighting for our community. No, yeah. Unless you're talking.
Okay, Abby and Maddie. Abby and Maddie.
But that's the thing is they're pro-Irish stuff.
All right, if you can quickly grab a cookie. We would like to get everyone out of here on time. I know that it's a Friday night. So I'm gonna be a stickler with time tonight. Okay. Hey, great job with our first two presenters. Our next two presenters, we're taking you to another country of Korea. Abigail Lynn, we call her Abby. Abby Lynn Webster, and also Maddie Noel Sedgwick, and we'll start with Abby, and her presentation is on harmony and diversity, building community bonds in a multicultural church congregation in Korea. All right.
Bill was not a part of our field school, so you won't see these beautiful visuals like you did in the last two presentations, but hopefully it's still interesting enough. So yes, I'm Abby. I went to Korea, and I'll be talking about building multicultural bonds in a church congregation. So after a week of wandering the streets of Seoul, falling in love with the people and the food, a sense of loneliness and isolation started to creep in, and I wondered if I would ever find a sense of belonging while in my 2 months there, or if I would always feel like the only blonde foreigner in the entire country. But of course, this is an exaggeration, but only 5% of South Korea are foreign residents. So it remains one of the most ethnically homogenous nations in the world. As Korea grows in the global market, it's dealing with this intricate balance of having globalization demand this space of diversity and inclusion, while Korea really seeks to uphold and preserve its heritage and its pride and its strong ethnic identity. And so there's been challenges as the number of foreigners increases. But this here is the Northern Military Branch, my kind of refuge and home away from home while I was in Korea. And they are a success story of Koreans and non-Koreans jointly creating community together, a community of belonging and inclusion. So the Northern Military Branch is an English-speaking congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They meet weekly. Anywhere between 25 and 40 members attend the branch. And they meet up there in Busan. It's about 2 hours north of Seoul. And it's right next to a US military base, Camp Casey. And so when I walked into this rented office space above a car mechanic shop, I did not know what to expect. But what I found was this community where it was immediately recognizable that was something different. There was something special and unique about them. So again, this is the branch, a very diverse community composed of 5 kind of different groups of people. So we have the US military. They are on rotation 9 months at a time. There's no families with them, so it's just usually the guys. Then there's this group of Liberian refugees. They fled Liberia about 30 years ago in the conflict, went to a refugee camp in Ghana, and then were resettled in Korea. We have migrant workers from Nigeria, Haiti, and Sri Lanka. Korea has a lot of migrant workers due to labor shortages. We have business expats. They're just working for their corporation's location in Seoul, usually. Local Koreans who speak English and want to keep it up and enjoy English association. And then there was me, who was a random BYU student there for 2 months. And so while I was there, the question kind of settled in my mind, how does this super diverse, unique group of people form such a strong community and sustain it? What is it about them that was so different and unique in my experience in Korea? And while I was there, I went to church for 8 weeks, engaged in participant observation. You'll see I was a full-fledged member of the branch later in the presentation. I had a lot of informal chats, conversations, and then a few semi-structured interviews. And then I just had the day-to-day experiences of being a foreigner in Korea. Here is a little table of my interlocutors or informants that I'll talk about today. So you'll see they have a variety of, they come from a variety of countries. They're there for a lot of different reasons, and they have a variety of family situations. And the like number one informant was Success. She was from Liberia. She was the president of her refugee community organization and the Relief Society president. So this very strong woman who really liked to talk. So she was awesome. And then President Smith had become the branch president 8 months before I got there. So you'll hear about him a lot. And then I just have, so I break the elements of community into 4 different categories or reasons. And so this is just showing who contributed to the conversation about each of the topics. Okay, so like I just said, I broke it down into 4 different groups or components of community building. The first being a shared belief system, everyone being members of the church. The second being commensality, or the act of eating together. The third is shared responsibility, and the fourth is shared support. So I'll just dive into each of these. So with shared beliefs, obviously having a shared belief system naturally brings a lot of commonalities, but it also brings a really good starting point. Before there's connection and friendships formed, devotion is a really good way to get people together. And so we had a member named Kingsley who was Nigerian, and he would travel 3 hours each week to get to church. And he didn't have a lot of friends at first. He would just stay for church and then leave. But as I was there, I watched him stay longer and longer and longer as friendships formed. But his desire to worship was the number one motivator for him at first. And we also had members who would work all night and then just come to church to worship Jesus. So, also in the church is a natural emphasis on creating Zion communities. The structure is set up to create board or branch families. We call each other brother or sister. And so there is an institutional structure that's desired to be a community of family. A researcher named Kristen Lee Black did work with ethnographic work with communities. And she reported that special kinship networks form simply from the structure of a branch or a ward. So kind of similar to my last point, that institution of the church creating space for community. Next is commensality. The relationship between food and community and culture has been talked about by social scientists for decades. And food as a total social fact is a basic fundamental component of humanity. But the way we do it, how we eat, speaks a lot to culture and who we are. And so Smith and Harvey say that when we sit and eat together, we create a space to break down barriers and new ideas can flow. So I think during these weekly lunches that were held after the church block, they were a cultural potluck. And so everyone would bring food. So there would be like Korean food, American, like they'll say bulgogi and hot dogs and baked beans and some Nigerian soup and fufu all together on the table for us to eat and enjoy. And so Gertz has this idea that culture is social and so is its meaning. And so some other researchers took that idea and said, our ability to eat is innate, but our ability to eat rice and beans is cultural. So by bringing their cultural foods, they were sharing a part of themselves with everyone else and strengthening each other's knowledge of each other. One of the members said, a much greater deal of sharing life experiences and opinions and politics and comparing different things that people have lived through and seen, and people asking each other questions was happening at the lunch way more than in any other part of the church meeting. So this is where chatting and true connection kind of was able to form. The third point is shared responsibility. And so I learned that in the past, the branch had not always been this strong. And in a church that's run a lot by callings and volunteer work, those callings were kind of given more to the military members. So they said the African members were kind of sidelined in the sense that they didn't want to add to the already challenging life and burdens that they were experiencing. But it created leadership that turned over every 9 months and a lack of representation by a majority of the ward. And so 8 months before I got there, a branch president was called that was local to the area. He was going to live there for at least 3 or 4 years. And he called Brother Saye, the first African member, to the branch presidency. He also called Success to be the Relief Society president, and gave all the other members roles and duties. So they'd show up to church early to prepare the sacrament, or stay late after sweeping and cleaning up the building. And this really gave them kind of stake in the game. And I was also relied on a lot, though I didn't have an official calling while I was there. I played the piano, conducted the music, said the prayers, gave talks, taught Relief Society, taught nursery, taught primary, all in the 2 months that I was there. So I shared the opinion along with the other members that there really is a need to feel needed, and callings kind of build that. And then finally, shared support. So Black says again, quote, ethic of care becomes a code of conduct, and caring for others or serving others becomes an ethos or habitus, and a way of being. The branch was through serving. And this branch was excelled at that. There was a lot of help with legal issues. The Korean legal system is very complex for foreigners with different statuses and rules. And so the Smiths would help organize pro bono legal work or translate with things. They helped finding secure work for each other. And then they were really good at celebrating. So our Relief Society lesson one Sunday was a surprise baby shower, pictured here, for 2 of the women. Our Ari was from Australia and Marielle was from Haiti, both far away from family as they prepared for this new stage of life. Able to celebrate them and help them feel supported. And Marielle immediately started crying when she walked in. And it was just a sign to me that this is a community, this is a family that supports each other and is there for each other, even if they're so different from one another. So most of the members of this ward were a little displaced in one way or another, but they found connection and community and family with each other. And this eclectic group, who I thought at first only shared a religion, actually shared so much more than that. And they really transformed my experience in Korea and the way I thought about diversity and community building. And so what started as just a shared belief system was strengthened into this beautiful family through eating and talking together, through shared responsibility, and through supporting and serving each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Abby. And while Maddie is setting up a wonderful presentation, be thinking about some questions you can ask both of the girls. Maddie's presentation is actually a good segue to the next, Abby's presentation, I'm sorry. Abby's presentation is a great segue to the next one. Maddie Noel Sedgwick, she was also in Korea. And the title of her presentation is Becoming Zion, Generational Dynamics and Foreigner Integration in Korean LDS Communities. Maddie?
Okay. Yeah, so as Dr. Finau said, my name is Maddie, and I will be presenting on some shared experiences that Abby kind of touched on, but it was slightly different. So I focused more on Korean LDS wards and communities. and the foreigner experience of integrating into those. And just as a little bit of background to this, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I've gone my whole life attending many different types of wards. So family wards, young single adult wards, and international wards as well. And that's kind of what informed my my interest in understanding the following, which was what are the factors that impact the cross-cultural interactions between the foreign visitors and the Korean members of these wards. But before I get too far into what I found, I'll go over my methodology. So I spent 8 weeks in Seoul. And during that time, I conducted participant observation as well as interviews in primarily three different wards. The Gangnam family ward, the Gyeomun family ward, and the young single adult ward. And so these are all different Korean wards. And located here. So over here we have the Gyeomun family ward, and that is where my homestay mom attended. So I attended several times with her, without her, but that's where that was. And then over here is the building for the Gangnam ward and the young single adult ward. And it's about an hour apart by subway. And so this is a picture of the Gangnam and young single adult ward, and that is the building. So in my research, I found that generational dynamics of these different types of wards played a large part in the different experiences of foreigners integrating into each of them. So specifically, I was able to divide my data into kind of two different groups. One would be classified as intergenerational, or the family wards, where there's many different generations of people interacting. The other was monogenerational, which was the YSA ward. So there was just primarily one generation. Everyone was around the same age. And I found that that had a large impact on the experience. So specifically, I then found two factors that influenced the different experience of foreigners in an intergenerational or a monogenerational ward. The first is that social obligations of hospitality differ between generations. Now, what I mean by that is that in Korean culture, when two people are the same age, there is not much of a cultural responsibility for one to provide for or care for the other. Whereas within a community, an older woman, for example, would have more of a cultural responsibility to look out for the younger people. And then secondly, Korean friend spaces are, and I'm going to get into more of what I mean by that. Okay, so in Korean culture, there's a focus on in-group belonging rather than out-group including. And among other consequences to this, one is that friend groups can just seem private. And an example that I have that I experienced of this was with my homestay sister and her friends and Abby. And so basically we went out to dinner with them a couple times during our stay. And I was really surprised to hear at the very beginning when we met them that although the three of them had been best friends since middle school, none of them had ever met each other's other friends. And that just called my attention to realizing how much that there's just more of a focus on who's in the group rather than expanding the borders of that group, and that it's more private. And secondly, there are high levels of obligation between friends. So whereas before I had kind of mentioned that in a generational sense, if you're of the same generation, that's not what brings obligation. On the other hand, once you do enter into a friendship with someone, the narrative kind of changes to now there's much more obligation, meaning, you know, you need to dedicate lots of time together, emotional investment, texting, planning for the future, things like that. And so basically I found that these two values impacted the differences between the intergenerational and the monogenerational words. So specifically, how that comes into play is that with the intergenerational words, I found that you can be included into the community without being brought into a private friend space. So, and I'll share an example of that in just a second. Whereas in the monogenerational communities, there's more of a delicate balance between inclusion into the community versus having to kind of include someone in the private friend space because you're of the same age, the same generation. So that's kind of more of a consideration. So in my time in Korea, one example over here was with my homestay mom, pictured here. One Sunday I attended ward conference at her ward with her. And afterwards, there was this giant feast for the whole ward. And so she took me through the buffet tables, ensuring that I was heaping my plate with every single food imaginable. And then she brought me over to the corner to sit with her friends. And she kind of introduced me to them and made sure that, you know, we were connecting and things like that. And at no point in that interaction was there kind of a question like, oh, does this mean that I'm friends now? Like I'm part of this friend group, you know, because they were older women, I was a young woman. So that wasn't really an awkward question that needed to be asked. Rather, it was just me being included into the community. Now, an interesting story from the young single adult ward that I experienced was, one time, these two Korean women from the ward invited a fellow foreigner friend to a little dinner outing. And then that friend extended the invitation to me. So there were 4 of us going out to dinner. We had a nice time, ate, chatted, went to a cafe afterwards, and then took some cute pictures in a photo booth. And then so after this experience, me and my foreigner friend kind of thought to ourselves like, oh, this is great. Like we'll probably see them on Sundays now and say hi, maybe sit together. So I was surprised when the following Sundays, we never spoke again. And even though we were all present, but rather than kind of like speak to each other or sit with each other, the 2 members of the ward stuck with their little girl gang in like by themselves in the pews or whatever. But moral of the story is that there remained kind of this weird barrier, even though we had already met and kind of formed what seemed to be the beginning of a friendship. So this just provides a brief kind of picture of like typical church or church activities and what the experience is like for myself specifically. And when I say here unofficial translation, that refers to instances where translation was not provided as part of a church calling, but rather a member of the ward volunteered graciously to just sit next to me and whisper into my ear the translation of what was going on. So to conclude, as I mentioned, I found that social obligations of hospitality differ between generations, and this plays an impact in how foreigners specifically are received into these communities. So for family wards, more generational difference means that there's more social obligation to care for and provide, specifically from older to younger. And so that was that experience. And then for the young single adult ward, this lack of generational difference meant that there was less social obligation for members to care for and provide for each other. And the second factor was that Korean friend spaces are private, and in family wards, this was not a barrier to inclusion because one could be included without being included in that private friend space. Whereas in the young single adult ward, being included into the community was more synonymous with being included for the potential of that private friend space that was private. And so there were firmer boundaries to inclusion. So what? So I've kind of focused on the different experiences of foreigners in these communities, but I think what reflects back from these experiences is things that we can take and move forward in our own communities. So first, I hope that
like in the intergenerational family wards, who had more of a focus on providing and caring for younger generations. We can do that in our communities. And like in the young single adult ward, there was more of a focus on strengthening the members of the community. And I hope that we can also remember to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Maddie? You could join Maddie. And we'll start our 10 minutes of Q&A. All right.
I can talk
I'll
loud.
give you my, the microphone because we want everyone to hear the question.
Okay, so I have a question for both of you guys, so that's not too much. But my first thing was after listening to, can you guys, I guess you can hear me okay, it's fine. But after listening to Abby's and Maddie's together, I'm wondering for Abby, like, how is hospitality in your project? How did those maybe like multicultural instances, how did they look to hospitality? Because obviously, like in Maddie's project, yeah, I guess I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. When you say that, I immediately think of like the hugs I was greeted with. So I have an embarrassing anecdote for the answer to this question. So the first Sunday I was there was facet testimony meeting. And I was just a little stressed and overwhelmed about being in Korea in the first place. And so I went up to bear my testimony. I probably shouldn't have done, and started crying. And none of these people knew me at that point. But after, I was just received so warmly. Like they were just hugging me even though they had no idea who I was. And so I think that's what triggered this immediate like welcoming into the community and the way I saw hospitality. But then I also saw it through others. That shared support component was like people were always giving rides to each other and visiting each other in like if there were medical emergencies or so I just feel like the service oriented and like charity centeredness of the people created this feeling of hospitality that was really unique and strong.
That's really cool. Okay, so this is a little bit different, but I know a little bit about Zhong. So, and I know you do too. How does Zhong play into that? Because I was listening and I was like, okay, like this feels like it's connected to that. It feels like it's connected to a certain commitment that you have to people you know and have a relationship with. And maybe you want to explain Zhong too. I don't know.
You've hit the nail on the head. So I didn't mention like that specific terminology in my presentation just because I didn't want to spend time explaining it. But I think that plays a large part in experiences. So for those who aren't familiar, the Korean concept of Jong is like this idea that like there's like these kinship type networks where once you're part of these networks, there's a strong emotional bond and connection between the people. And so that kind of plays a part in this, especially because in the context that the friend spaces are private. And it's because you kind of have to have that jong with people. Like if you don't have it, then you don't have it. And so, and it takes a lot of time and energy to build it up. And so specifically with foreigners who are visitors to these communities, you know, you're not going to be there for a long period of time and you don't have much to offer because you need all the help, you know? And so it's kind of hard to build up that reciprocal connection with people in that coming from that kind of a context. So I think that was one of the strengths that I saw in each of these wards is that these Jong networks were so strong and that the people that were members were very connected and just did a great job of supporting each other and helping each other out.
Great. Any more questions? We have about 7 minutes left of question time.
The LDS Church is very convert centered. What do you think the relation, if any, is between wanting to have someone join us and hospitality and the genuineness of it all?
Just to what a specific one you want.
Yeah, to any one of you.
I can talk first. So Marielle, which was the Haitian woman that the baby shower was for, was actually not a member of the church. She might have joined since, I don't know. And so I think what I noticed and was impressed by was that regardless of whether they were members or not members, they were treated the same. And so all of the elements of community that I saw were regardless of membership. So I'm sure like for someone investigating the church, like that would be probably a good thing to be so welcomed in. But there was not really a difference, like, okay, because they aren't a member of the church yet, we're gonna treat them special and like try and treat them, like persuade them to join us, so.
Do you want me to answer as well, or was that?
Up to you.
Do you have, okay. I mean, unless you have, yeah, I don't have any converts in my data set, so.
Well, my question is for both of you as well. You both have, if anthropology is about making the familiar strange and making the strange familiar, I think both of you have your positionality with regards to either one of those potential ways of approaching your projects. You're sort of like situated, you're positioned in an interesting space. You kind of hinted at that, Maddie, is it? With the friends that you thought were friends and turns out weren't quite yet friends or whatever. And that with the girl gang, I think is he referred to them. And also in sort of like, being a foreigner in a like, in this religious space. I guess my question is, I don't know how, if you're to sort of like put a fine point on the reflexive dimension of your fieldwork, how, I don't know, to what extent or what insights sort of like come out of thinking about your positionality with regards to this. I guess I'm struggling to put a fine point on it, but I guess I'm trying to get at like, what do you get out of sort of like, the cognitive and the affective dimensions of like not having a friend that you thought was becoming a friend? How does that help you in your analysis? And I guess similarly with the ward that you were studying as an ethnographic object, but also intimately a part of. I guess if you could just sort of generally comment on the reflexive dimension of your fieldwork and how that helped you arrive at deeper insights in that project of both making the familiar strange and the strange familiar, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me at least, that's kind of what spurred my initial interest, was because, within the church there's this common saying that the church is the same everywhere. And while that's true structurally, it's not always true in practice because culture does influence the way we do things. And so that's why I was interested in seeing, okay, what's the feeling of going to church in Korea? And so for my experiences, I didn't start out wanting to study this, but it kind of did come because of that reflexive element, where as I was experiencing what it was like to be a foreigner attempting to become a part of these Korean wards, it was largely my experience that inspired me to kind of shift and say, okay, this is going to be my focus, because like the experience I'm having is different maybe in some ways and maybe in other ways not than what I expected. And so yeah, at least for me, I felt like a large part of my project was just very reflexive on my personal experiences and how on how I was feeling and how that and what I could draw from that.
Did the girl gang care when you left?
Oh, I wasn't part of the girl gang. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, that's like my favorite tagline of anthropology, so I appreciate you bringing it up. So I think my experience was centered on making the familiar strange, because I think that's what surprised me about going to this branch and instantly feeling so comfortable. So then the process of being ethnographic and taking field notes allowed me to be reflexive and notice all of these things, because just going to really like doing things like conducting the music and going to Relief Society and doing these things I'm very familiar with makes it hard to take myself out of it. So that act of
of writing throughout and then looking at it often, I think is what kind of helped me be reflexive through the process.
We have time for one.
Yes.
Thank you. So just, I think it's just two comments for both of you. Thing that I find most beautiful about this is your participation was involving you in the community, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And that as you're getting involved in these communities, you're also sort of reflecting on it. And I think to see, I think it's a powerful thing to watch how community gets formed and how community is made. And it's an important thing as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to be aware of this. I think this is what anthropology brings uniquely to the problem. Whereas psychology would imagine everybody being treated as individuals and somehow that's going to bring everyone together. Anthropologists realize there's something more needed of how do people come together in a way that's going to be create a community and create a community of Zion, essentially. So this is really lovely work. I love that dimension of it. The second thing I wanted to mention was just a comment about sort of in general, thinking about anthropology. This is advice to all anthropologists here. Of that I think the real strength is in what you're doing is to show us how things happen, right? Show us how community is made. And I guess this is maybe just my perspective, but I would say we're probably better off to avoid going too much into a kind of so what that gets too much of an ethical stance of saying this is what we should be doing, right? I think we're at our strongest when we say this is how things happen. Let's describe it. Let's give people an understanding, and let's not fear the particular. Okay, this is really important for all anthropologists. Don't fear the particular. You're in Korea. You did great work in Korea. You can tell us about, and it's in a very particular place. So tell us about that. And then we can do the work of sort of figuring out what the particular means to the universal, but it can be really relevant for the church in Korea, right? I think that's where your most powerful insights come. The real big so whats are in understanding how our church can grow in a place that it's been challenged. It's had some challenges lately. So anyways, that's a more generic thing. Let's not fear the particular, folks. Let's lean into it and let's embrace it. But great presentations. You're welcome to comment back if you want to, or just leave it at that. Yeah.
Rose, you want to make one last comment?
No, that was a good point.
You don't have anything to add to Dr. Thompson's remarks?
Are you afraid of the particular?
But seriously, I feel like we get anxious, like, oh, I'm just talking about Korea. That doesn't matter, right? It does. There's so much about that example that the specifics of it, that's all the stuff of anthropology, the day-to-day, the things unfolding over time. It's beautiful. And yeah, I say let's let that shine.
And it's also beautiful to have our distinguished faculties here to challenge our students and to make the discussion and questions rich and the learning. So thank you. Thanks, Abby and Maddie. Okay, so it is time for our next two presentations. And while they're getting ready, please help yourself with the cookies. I see some kids are here. Please come up and help yourself with cookies on top of the piano.
When I was in France. That's I'm like, I was French speaking, but I was like,
I don't even I know, I read it 10 times.
Maybe.
Yeah, right.
Eight-letter word, 4-letter word.
Okay,
That's.
but then there was Gina's name.
So hers was long. Yeah.
That's not right. Do you know that sounds? On around the check-in is till 7:30.
Okay, I think we are ready for our next presentation. Grab a cookie, have a seat, eat as you're listening. We're not leaving Korea yet. We were in Belfast, Ireland earlier and traveled to Korea, and we are still in Korea. We've got two great presentations coming up. First one will be Brooke, Mauai, Saluone, and her presentation is Unveiling Realities and Cultivating Resilience, Insights from the BYU Anthropology Field School regarding the student experience. Maya?
Hi, I'm Maya. Yeah, I was one of the field school students who went to Korea. Sorry, I will have to definitely read off my phone because, yeah. Anyways, so for the first month in Korea, I focused on a completely different project than what I'm presenting on today. And that's really become the motivation for the research behind my project. So as my title says, I researched the undergraduate experience doing ethnography work. And then from my perspective, this is only a small portion of what I can add to this discussion. But I'd love to add to the conversation from the experience that me and my classmates had while we were in Korea. To start, I want to share an experience that'll further explain my positionality on this subject. Before attending Korea, I've been developing a completely different project. Initially, I went with a goal in mind to study temple stays. And I love temple stays. They're so cool and unique because they combine culture and tourism. I am an anthropology student, but I'm also a business minor as well. Combination for the two. And unfortunately, that project did fall through. It was not due to lack of trying. With the help of Dr. Thompson, we spent about 5 weeks trying to cultivate this and work on it for myself, trying to find sites and find contacts, but unfortunately kept falling through. 5 weeks in, that's when I decided with the help of Dr. Thompson to maybe lean into lay Buddhism and try to learn more about that. And I spent about a week studying that when I realized that it just wasn't something that I was interested in. My attention kept coming back to the student experience and the experience of my fellow classmates. While I was trying to work on my own project, I had the opportunity to deal with my other classmates and learn about their projects and their field sites. And then I got their feedback. Yeah, just their shared experiences. The purpose of this study is to provide future field school students and potentially the department with suggestions or just an overall experience, to share a narrative of the student experience and the perspectives.
This will include their thoughts, their feelings, and then this will be demonstrated through stories and also through movies as well. Okay. All right, yeah, so I went with a goal initially to study local stays. Yeah, sorry. Okay, and then some basic background for people who don't really know exactly what fieldwork is. I'll just provide a very brief explanation of what it is. Fieldwork is the central activity of anthropology, using important tools such as participant observation, field notes, visuals, and audio recordings, interviews, both formal and informal. And transcriptions. Ethnographers are able to gather data, transform into observations, reflections, and then create their own interpretations. And then as stated on the BYU Anthropology Department website, students conduct firsthand data collection and analysis. And then usually that is used to write our senior thesis, which we're doing right now. So my research question, it was, what is the authentic student experience? For me, it's really important because I felt like I came in with this idea in my head of what my experience was going to be like. And it was very different, which was not necessarily a negative thing, but it was a little different. And then what are the overarching themes and takeaways for students who go through the program? For my methods, I mainly utilize participant observations, interviews, and surveys. And in doing participant observations, like I said earlier, I did go to a lot of sites with other students and had the opportunity to do interviews with them. Me and Essie, we interviewed a monk together. It was very, very cool experiences with them. And then although my data does strictly draw from the Korea Field School, I do believe there are a lot of overlaps with other field schools that themes that overlap with that as well. And I do feel like it really is impossible to try to summarize the whole experience in the span of 10 minutes. So hopefully I can just share the key findings that I found, and I believe that were both impactful. In all honesty, I started this project about 2 weeks, with 2 weeks left in my field school. And the interviews I was doing, the people I was talking with, everybody was very burnt out and very tired. So it kind of started off being very negative. In the moment, most of us were really struggling. Our projects, we were feeling very overwhelmed with them. We're not exactly where we were wanting to be at that point. And then after watching a few of these presentations, I'm sure these feelings of inadequacy is difficult to see since each of these students came with something so brilliant and well developed. My original claim was this when I was in Korea. Field school experiences can be overwhelming, uncomfortable, and sometimes make students feel inadequate. For most students, we spent the first few weeks searching for sites and contacts, and that kind of made it really difficult for us to dive right in. A lot of us, we didn't find anything until about halfway through, but for us, it was a bit tricky. Although it created many possibilities to have the creative freedom to choose what we wanted to study, everybody felt overwhelmed with their projects. I mean, excuse me, not everybody, but a lot of students did feel overwhelmed. While preparing for field school, a lot of students felt like they had unrealistic expectations. And then here's just some quotes. I promise it's really, I don't know. These ones are a bit difficult. For this project, they said, I knew it's going to be hard, but I didn't realize how hard. Not only is there difficulties in research, but there are a lot of personal difficulties and anxieties that I think people don't always consider. My attitude changed a lot through the field school. I was excited when I first heard about it, but the closer it got, the more scared I was. During field school, I was pretty pessimistic and nothing was working out. I was homesick and stressed. So that's what one of my fellow field school students said. And I would have to say that, yes, fieldwork has made us feel these things of inadequacy and uncomfortable and overwhelming. But I would also argue that it has made us more resilient, adaptable, and has built our confidence. Field school challenged us as students, ethnographers, and people. We experienced many rough patches during our time in Korea, but there was this reoccurring theme of learning how to roll with the punches. Many of our topics, they changed a lot over time, and many of the contexts we had fell through in situations like that. Many of us doubted ourselves and the data we were gathering and its relevance to our research. And a lot of us hit roadblocks that would made it harder for us to just dive right into it. And then a lot of people dealt with homesickness, culture shock, and other situations like that. This is my really good friend, Ellie. She didn't really find a contact until about 6 weeks into her project. But me and her, we did everything together. Eleni really struggled to find the group that she was trying to study. She was studying Latino immigrants in Korea. And it's a very small, very niche group of people, very hard to find. Eleni really felt like she was struggling and falling behind and not being involved with the project, and she was also really missing her family. But this is what she said after interviewing her coming home. She said, "Yeah, I definitely think when I get home, I'll look back at this and say, I'm never gonna do anything like that again, but also I'm glad I did. I feel really proud of myself and accomplished. It's definitely very rewarding. It's really hard for me, but it makes it more rewarding." And then during field school, I was pretty pessimistic. Nothing was working out. I was homesick and stressed. Now in hindsight, I feel more optimistic about where my research is, and I feel I did better than I thought that I did when I was studying in Korea. This is Abby. She just presented, and she, she was studying the Northern Military LDS Branch Group in Korea. I'll just point out this part. She said that she learned a lot about the limitations and the struggles of research, as well as how to problem solve and pivot when things weren't going well. I learned how to adapt and be flexible, and try to make the most of a really packed timeline. And then Maddie as well, she just said she grew so much as a person and gained real world experience. And then Jackie as well, he learned how to be comfortable just being confused. And then although this was a really difficult experience, I myself am not somebody who's very comfortable going out into spaces and talking to strangers and doing anything like this. I feel like we as a class, we've really grown and developed a lot as anthropologists. We've become a lot more resilient. We've adapted to hard situations, and when our topics have changed and had to develop, we were able to deal with that in the situation, even though towards the end we were very done, very burnt out. And in conclusion, I would argue that the experience, although it's not perfect, it helps students develop further as anthropologists and has helped them grow in other ways beyond their research. Although students have been able to produce impressive projects, the feelings that they experience during their field school are very real. And that includes culture shock, homesickness, and stuff like that. But by dealing with these issues, students became more resilient, confident, and optimistic. And then learning how to adapt and learn how to be comfortably uncomfortable has helped them develop different skills that'll help them beyond their college career. And then I just wanted to thank the department for giving us the opportunity to go to such a cool place and do research on our own. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Maya. And our last presentation from Korea is from Sarah Elizabeth, we call her Essie, Workman, and her presentation is Buddhism, excuse me, Buddhism and Business, a study on Korean organizational structure.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. I will also be muting this because I'm not very good at speaking. Oh. Okay. Buddhism and business, a study on Korean organizational structure. My name is Essie Workman. I'm a student of anthropology and conducted research on both Buddhism and business during my 2-month field school in South Korea. And I like this picture because you can see Professor Thompson's elbow and Abby's blonde hair. So during my time, I continuously did background research. I used participant observation, informal interviews, and formal interviews to collect that. It is a simplified list of my informants and sites. All informants were employees of their respective organizations. That's, for lack of a better term, it just means they made their living with their connection to one of these organizations. So I met with people inside Buddhist temples, in their homes, and public spaces. Some terms to know before we go any further are Korean Buddhism and chaebol. So Korean Buddhism has existed for centuries and has morphed over time. Right now it refers to one of these two monastic orders, the Jogye order and the Taego order. The Jogye order makes up about 80% of Korean Buddhists, and they run about 95% of the temples in Korea. The Taego order is much smaller and is reportedly losing popularity. For the purposes of this study, I'm going to focus on the Jogye order. Chaebols are businesses in Korea that are family run. They're not mom and pop shops, they're multi-billion-dollar companies, and they produce about 80% of Korea's GDP and employ about 50% of Korean workers. Their names you will recognize, like Samsung, LG, and Hyundai, to name a few. This is what I found. The organizations of the Jogye order and chaebol are similarly structured. These similarities suggest that there's an overarching method of government. I refer to government in the way it is described by the anthropologist Hocart in his theory of hierarchy and governance. Hocart was an anthropologist that theorized about the origin of government. He says government was blocked out in society long before the appearance of government as we now understand it. They were originally part not of a system of government, but of an organization to promote life, fertility, and prosperity. So with this view of government in mind, I would like to claim the similarity between the Jogye order and chaebol are significant because it suggests that there is a pattern of governance that extends beyond any individual entity. It instead affirms a distinctly Korean way to structure groups that allows both of these organizations to create prosperity for themselves and their community at large. The anthropologist Tembaya uses a term to identify this higher pattern of governance. He calls it galactic polity. I wish to show through these two seemingly unconnected organizations that there is a Korean polity, an overarching Korean form of governance. So what are the characteristics in both Buddhism and chaebol that show this Korean polity? There are many, but with my limited time, I would like to discuss 4. I will only be able to give short examples for each of these, so feel free to ask for further evidence. I will start by explaining the bottom 2, external hierarchy and internal hierarchy. External hierarchy. Both of these organizations work with external organizations for their mutual benefit and the stability of society. For example, they both have mutually beneficial relationships with the Korean government. The Jogye order does not own the temples that it runs. It loans them from the government. The monks have a place to live and practice and share Buddhist principles. And in return, the government doesn't have to care for these historic sites. It also brings in revenue with temple stays and donations, which then is shared with the government. The government gives chaebols guidelines on what they can and cannot produce. Only 2 chaebol are allowed to produce the same thing at a time. For example, Samsung and LG are the only ones allowed to make phones in Korea. This is like insurance for the businesses. They stay inside government guidelines, and other chaebols, which could be their biggest competitors, will too. This helps the government by bringing income into the country and providing jobs for citizens. And allowing 2 companies to compete in each market ensures that no business becomes too powerful as well. From their relationships with the government, both of these entities establish authority over competitors, making it hard for any smaller businesses or other Buddhist orders to gain traction. This creates an interorganizational hierarchy within Korea. So Chable, over here, Chable have supervisors and bosses, like many other businesses that we know about. And the Jogye order has head monks, temple stay directors, etc. So there is an instituted hierarchy in both of these organizations. The respect for hierarchy is also evident within these organizations. Even in the metro, I saw younger employees finding a seat for their superior coworker, then standing for the ride themselves. I saw monks at a temple very intentionally make their way over to another monk with seniority and bow very deeply. These actions were clearly not just because of age. They didn't find a seat for every old man on the metro, and they didn't bow to every old tourist that came by. They were done in respect for seniority within their own organization. Their actions are not mirrored by the senior employee either, suggesting that this is indeed respect for hierarchy and not just general politeness. Before I introduce the last two characteristics of Korean polity, I want to bring up this dichotomy spoken about by Antonio Sorolla. He brings up Hokart's theory that hierarchy is created for the cooperation for life, and says that it opposes Hobbesian theory that hierarchy exists to assert dominance, which is true for Korean polity. I want you to think about that in the next couple of sections. So next I'll go through the top two characteristics: institute, community, and stability. Employees are expected to devote time and effort to their role and the role they play in their organization's community. Monks and nuns in the Jogye order are expected to be celibate. Chable employees are also expected to sacrifice family time. In an interview, the wife of a Chable employee said that she never gets to eat with her husband during the week. And they only get to really spend time together on Sundays. This was hard for her, but she understood that this was part of the job. Within both of these organizations, the priority of sharing time with coworkers and shared sacrifice creates a community outside of simply family connection. Both of these organizations ask a lot of time and loyalty from their employees, but they also give loyalty in return. Monks and nuns often have jobs to do either at temples or administration offices around the city. However, I met a nun who was given leave of her duties for a time to take care of her aging mother who lived outside of Seoul. In Chable, I learned that employees, it's a very steady job position. In one interview with an expat working for Chable, he noted how odd it was that no one was ever fired, even if they couldn't do their job. They couldn't do their job. It was the boss's responsibility to find out what was going wrong and reassign them to a task that they could complete. Both of these organizations provide stable long-term jobs for their employees. So to address the question of Hokart or Hobbes from earlier, with these things in mind, I think that Korean polity is instituted in cooperation for life, as Hokart claims. These organizations are not as separate as we think, but instead form a hierarchy that, as Hokart says, exists to promote life and prosperity, meaning that they are part of one whole that is Korean polity. This could also be visualized by applying this Buddhist symbol. One of the things that signifies oneness. One of the things that it signifies is oneness and wholeness. It symbolizes that it symbolizes oneness not only for people, but for all things, being part of one body. So perhaps it can apply to Korean organizations as well, despite them coming from such seemingly different parts of life. They're all interconnected. I just want to finish by saying thank you, especially to Professor Thompson, who stayed with all of us Korean field schoolers and saw us through a lot of heartache. And to my husband, who was with me for this whole process and really helped me with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Essie. Maya, you can join Essie up there. We'll go ahead and start our 10 minutes of Q&A. Anyone wants to start?
I'm gonna try not to make one of our faculty do the first question, but I just have to ask this at the risk of turning this into a focus group. But we've honestly wondered whether it would be better to make field schools optional. And you have a very applied sort of like, robust empirical way of approaching that question. I'm wondering what what your ethnographic sense to an answer to that question would be, because, you know, at the end of the day, if we were going to make a dramatic change like that in our program, it should be approached ethnographically if we're to do it seriously. And in fact, I think, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Schulteis have a research assistant gathering a whole bunch of data from alumni and other people that, you know, are trying to get at some of these questions and the value of field school and so on. But we've, not that this is a proposal on the table per se, but one thing I personally thought is, you know, having two tracks where you have kind of a more traditional, you know, like other majors approach, where maybe there's a little capstone thing at the end versus having, like, you know, some departments do like a BA versus a BS, and the BA in economics has more math involved or something like that. And it's a distinction. I don't know. I'm just curious what, you know, should the field school be optional, or is the growth, difficult though it may be, that comes from that, should that be necessarily part of a degree that you get from UYU anthropology? I'm just wondering what you are actually, you know, I don't want this to devolve into a focus group, because you know, it should be focused on your presentations, but I just have to ask what you think about that.
Personally, I don't know, I think just being here and seeing these presentations and their projects, I think there's just so much value that adds to it. And honestly, I think it's just a great part of the program. I know in the moment, a lot of us were struggling a lot, but I mean, these guys have created such amazing things and have been able to come up with such great ideas that I think it's really beneficial for us. I know personally, even though I struggled a lot, I still grow a lot, and I feel like I'm able to think more anthropologically than I did before by going to, this is my first time going to a foreign country, doing anything like this. So for me, it was an incredible experience. And honestly, I think most people here, one of my questions from my interviews was, when you look back at this, when you think this is a meaningful experience, and every single one of them said that it was. It kind of went a little bit further into that, but I do think there's a lot of value in this.
Are you going to answer my question head on, or whether it should be optional or not? And I guess the question would be, is the value of, even though the difficulties involved, making it, if you want to do this degree program, it's kind of a rite of passage that you kind of go through. I don't know, like, I wonder what, if you even lean either way on that question.
I'm torn right down the middle. Part of me is like, like what my friend Eleni said, I would definitely never do this again, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. Yeah, I'm really torn because I really love it and I really think it's beneficial, but yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if that answers the question.
I appreciate it.
That really makes me feel like it is beyond essential for us. I have a question for each of you for a comment. Thank you. These are really nice presentations. I took the utility of your use of authentic to mean kind of like behind the scenes, not the brochure, you know. So I was wondering what an inauthentic experience might be. Did Christian have an inauthentic field experience? Do you see, those of you that are in Korea know what I'm asking? Yeah. Christian was there, but without did you feel the growth? Well, either did your wife also, but did you feel the growth, the pressures, in the absence of knowing that you were supposed to be, of course, is an anxiety producing thing. This is what all field work is you're like, what am I getting stuff? Am I not getting, is this enough? Does this mean anything? Did you identify with any of these?
I feel like that's a hard question, because I did do some research. It was kind of required, but I never had the pressure of having to present it long term. And I think that if you're asking me, I think that pressure was a huge part of it, because I think that the bigger pressure was not necessarily just being in this place, although that was extremely hard. I think part of it was, are we accomplishing what I was meant to accomplish? And I'm here for 8 weeks, and if I don't get anything, I'm gone. I don't have anything to talk about Korean Buddhism, you know, if I didn't go to enough monks. And so, yeah, I think that's my take on that.
Yeah, so to me, this is, Dr. Thompson was talking about some of the values and approaches of anthropology. To me, this is this other great value of anthropology. You just have to do it. You just have to jump in If you don't, who will do it? And then for you, if you don't do it, who will you be? What will you do? It's just like anything else. It's dating, it's becoming a parent, taking on a career. You just, like, it's just one thing after another in life. It doesn't happen to you. You have to happen to it. I really valued that in your takeaway. I also really liked how you pivoted. That's terrific that you were able to do that with your field director, and that's another great value of it. Essie, just by bringing in Hokart and Tambaya, I think you really have helped us wrap together some running themes throughout this whole thing. So for example, you think of Abby and Maddie's branches. Do you suspect that you would see more similarity or less similarity between the Buddhist orders and businesses, or the branches and businesses?
That's a good question. I think that on first look, I would see more similarity between Buddhism and branches just because of the religiosity of it and that belief aspect. In the way that they are run, probably more Buddhism. In my experience, I found actually more freedom of thought in Buddhism than in cable organizations. And I think just the diversity that is in there is more represented in Buddhism.
But you take the point, right? That so thinking what Abby was saying, this is a disputed topic, but one of the definitions that people have given for religion, it's religio, tying back together. So these things that of course, this is what you are religio, you're retying, you're reconnecting. We can also think of Cambria's research and this difference between American rehab and Japanese rehab in terms of employability versus community as this benchmark. Are they different then, or in your view, what you're formulating in your thesis, are these in essence the same thing? Because you have that equal sign on each slide, very strong. I mean, it's a really strong claim to say this equals.
So is the question?
Well, so think about it. I mean, Cambria pointed this out. I thought it was a terrific insight. This difference between in the US rehab, this benchmark is, are you employable? Versus in Japan, it's, are you a part of the community, and can somebody come into your house and see that it's clean and that you're, a productive member of the community? And it looks like in your view, like if we're taking Hokart, like maybe that's not the same thing. Is it not the same thing? Is it the same thing? Is it not? You see what I'm getting at?
I do. In regards to Cambria's research, I think that the rehabilitation in the US and Japan, that's what we're comparing. I think that in purpose, they are trying to be similar. But like Cambria said at the beginning of her presentation, succeeding particularly in either realm. Japan is more successful, I think, because of what she's talking about with this specific rehabilitation program, and it is different. It's organized differently than in the US. US, I haven't heard of, there are rehabilitation programs that are doing good things, especially here in Salt Lake. I know of a couple. But I feel like the ones I've heard of are focused more on bringing them into the economic sphere and less on bringing them into a personal sphere. And so I think that differs. And that's why I think Japan has such success, because it allows them to re-enter community and society in a more direct way than focusing on economics. So I don't know if that spoke to your question, Zach, but
It's just more discussion. It raises, it threads through all of these different presentations. Super interesting.
If I could just do a quick question, I'll take it to Christian. Maya, can you talk about you have a thread of community through a bunch of these, right? The bonfire is community, the previous ones were community. Can you just speak a little bit about the nature of the community that you saw, was it in terms of the field school? That was one thing that you touched a lot on resilience and stuff, but I'm wondering, what did you see in terms of the field school community?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think a lot of our confidence ended up coming from the community that we built together as field schoolers. I remember there's been multiple times where we'd just be having a passing conversation. I'd be like, I had a contact and they fell through and it's just not working out. And I feel like I'm falling behind everybody else in the group. And then somebody else would chime in like, no, that's exactly what's going on with me right now. And so it was kind of this overwhelming feeling of like, I'm not being left behind. I am where I'm supposed to be. And even though this isn't exactly where I thought I'd be with my field work, I am at everybody else's level, and that created a really strong sense of community and built a lot of community for all of us.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I have so many questions today. Okay, so for my Professor Hickman's question, felt like it gave me permission to ask this. It's not very logic, but you could change anything like about the field school from the data you collected. This is maybe, let's say, is data driven. It could be. What do you feel like was the thing that came up the most that could have changed? Because it sounds like it's a good thing, but there are some bad parts.
Yeah, for sure. I think from the data that I collected most from people, I think it was, they felt like for a lot of people, their projects and their ideas that they had come up with, they felt like it was something they could do when they were here with the state. So we were studying it, we were building our teams and working on it. And then right when we got there, it was a lot harder than we expected to find these sites and these contacts. So I think maybe the suggestion would just be, are these projects actually realistic? And can I actually find a community of people to study and is just that. Cool.
I love that. Okay, really quick. Also, Essie, this kind of goes with Zach's question, but do non-chables that are becoming really big and do Christian churches fit into that? Do they fit into the hexagon?
I think so. Part of the research I did in Korea was on Coupon, which is a big business that is just coming into vogue, kind of. It's like the Korean Amazon. And it prides itself on being different a little bit. It brings foreigners in for 2 to 3 years at a time to kind of spice up the company. However, a lot of these foreigners coming in reported that it was structured similarly, or at least when they worked with Korean business professionals, it was the same kind of structure that they saw. That in their teams, they were isolated to all expat teams for Coupon. And so there wasn't actually much interaction, even in this new novel idea where we're bringing in foreigners to be part of our Korean business. So this is an example of a business that is not a chaebol, but follows these same structures.
Considering the mirrors that you found between Buddhism and business in Korea, considering the mirrors you found between Buddhism and business in Korea, do you think we have similar mirrors in the US between religion and business or government? And if not, do you think it would be beneficial? Sorry, one question.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I wish I could have included this more as a push to be more reflexive in our culture as well in looking at this. And I definitely think that there are mirrors in our religion and our businesses. I actually work for the church right now. And it's not the same structure. It's not as hierarchical as chaebols or Buddhism is, but it is structured like a business, and it has to be to manage all of the money and to run all of these people. So yes, I think that there is similarities and mirrors with our own culture.
Okay, and we have one more question.
Hi, I'm a research assistant of Dr. Thompson. I'm from Korea. I was really excited for you guys to go Korea last year, but yeah, and thank you for like hands-on experience, share your experience in the Korean LDS Church, and then like thank you for your insight about the parallel of Tebar and Buddhist analogy. But my actual question is to Maya. I feel like I was sad because I can feel that how serious you were when you like change your like research topic or something. So I just want to ask like how can, as I think there is like language barrier or cultural barrier definitely, or there's some discouragement about like mean Koreans or like just like being a stranger in a foreign country that you've never been to. But sorry, my actual question is like how can we like as a native Korean, how can I help to make this program like it's already good but better, or like do you think like if there's like assistant like direct assistant from like native speaker can be make this program better, or is there any thoughts or feedback about? Sorry, I'm just curious.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, honestly, my research for me, truthfully, I don't really know. I do know that with some people, the language barrier was actually a lot bigger than they realized it was. And for them, having a translator was actually not really even helpful to help them get into the community. It actually made them feel more like an outsider. So yeah, that's a great question, but yeah, I'm not super sure. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Essie. And we have two more presentations. This is break time. Grab a snack. As our last two presenters get ready.
I think. My thoughts on that is. They just.
Rub elbows with?
He doesn't work very much.
So he's made out of it.
No, yeah.
I'm glad I didn't pay.
Yeah, I give. But so we had people, but the problem is we need people. Apologies. If you let. And for that, we just.
Oh, that's like hard. Yes, but it's studying. Yeah, like it's really.
They need someone who knows.
Oh, I just.
Hard, I'll stand in the back.
Oh, experience field.
Yeah, more than a native person. I think knowing the location is really nice, but.
Like having a seminar, like still.
One of the problems is.
Like.
Oh, so it isn't before.
Oh, I'll struggle. She can be ready. Like, yeah, I feel like.
Someone like I.
Also, you.
All right, it is 7:15. We promise that we will get you out of here before 8 o'clock. We have two more presentations and then we will be done.
Oh, yes.
We still have more cookies up here. Okay, we are now going to leave Korea and go to Japan. I love the diversity of our field studies, our students going to Ireland and from there to Korea and now to Japan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll turn the time over to Sydney Tupou Nai. And her presentation is Beyond the Kirei? Kirei. Okay. Beyond the Kirei Pillars, Understanding Female Archetypes in Japanese Horror. All right, Sydney?
Hey, mahalo lele, everyone. Like Dr. Fino, I also have some Tongan ancestry, so I just wanted to say hey. Anywho, so yeah, Beyond the Kirei Pillars.
Malolele, Sydney.
So Kirei actually means beautiful in Japanese, so that's where we're heading in this direction. So just to kind of give some introduction to what I'm going to be talking about, it's mainly about the sexualization and objectification of female characters in Japanese horror contemporary media for the most part. Obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious too. But usually, a lot of film, horror, otherwise, usually has some sort of sexualization of women involved. My favorite example is Briseis from Troy in the Iliad. She's used as property and a reward and yada, 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 but that's on the completely opposite side of the world, right? So what about Japan? So this is where the specific Japanese cultural and societal norms comes in, and the importance of their like cultural and religious principles like impermanence. So permanence is the idea that everything is transient in nature, and by forming attachments to those transient things, it can kind of withhold you from enlightenment. And so this applies to Japan because Buddhism influenced a lot of Japanese societal norms. So there's the transient nature of literal nature, beauty, innocence, and a few other things. Innocence, both of them. Yeah, so usually, and also there's repulsion and attraction, and usually those things are on a not on this either side of an equal sign, right? They're usually like attraction versus repulsion. Usually if we're repulsed to something, we're not attracted to it. But in the case of Japanese horror, I found that repulsion oftentimes equals attraction. And I think that's something not a lot of us have noticed, so we're gonna jump into that. And I'm also going to explain how Japanese horror creates an alternative path to empowerment, or a second almost identity to the female character that they wouldn't have otherwise in the male-dominated world of alternate media. Story time. I went to the Shinjuku Horror Festival, run by foreigners, so yeah. But it was fun. The movies being shown were international films, so it included Japanese films, but also films from France, Italy, England, China. There's just a whole bunch of them. Regardless of where they came from, almost all of them, all the ones I had seen, I got there a little late. All of them I had seen definitely had themes of sexualization and violence in conjunction with one another. Which the director himself, after I asked him if this was an intentional choice, was like, I didn't. So last time I spoke to him on that trip. Just kidding. Anyway, yeah. So there was those themes, but another interesting element to that that horror film festival was that oftentimes when the women were being violent, or there was violence against the woman, the crowd would erupt in like cheering or like laughter, things that weren't like super, kosher in the world of the West, probably. And it wasn't just men, it was also women. There were plenty of women, Japanese women, foreigners that were, in this collective effervescence of female violence. So that's where I kind of am going with the female identity aspect of this. So obviously there's an issue, right? Female representation in Japanese media is on the side of sexualization and objectification. And there's deep notions of these expressed at the female and the feminine through horror. It's not just, I guess, female characters, but also like children are considered feminine, right? They're not masculine until they reach a certain point, right? So that's why feminine's in there. And then my question is, how are Japanese creators using the affect to sexualize and objectify women? And then before we get into my claim, there's a few things you need to understand. And that is the abject Okay, and the abject is the state where the boundaries between self and other are violated. This is a term by the French film theorist Julia Kristeva. And in other terms, the abject is a liminal space. It could be it's the reaction to not being able to categorize different phenomena or different elements of whatever, and it creates feelings of disgust and repulsion and fear. So it's not a traditional feeling of being scared. Someone's running at you with a chainsaw, you know that's wrong, and you're gonna be afraid. But this is a different kind of fear. And then that fear happens when you have to confront it and you have to categorize it. You can't run away from it. And to hammer this point home, are any of you afraid of clowns? Yes, one of you, really? Yeah, that's what I thought, be honest. So what, and this, okay, so, and we're afraid of clowns because of the abject. I'm sure most of you have heard of something called the uncanny valley. That's when something looks human, but it's not quite there, and you can't, and that's why it's scary, because you can't place it in the human category. You cannot recognize it. Your subconscious doesn't place it familiar to you. It puts it into an other group, but you also don't know what that other is. If you see a bat and you're scared of bats, you know it's an animal. You're placing it in that category. Clowns don't belong in the human category. They don't belong in the animal category. They belong in something completely other. Their behavior is also other. They defy social norms. They make inappropriate jokes. They hit each other. It's violent humor, and that's different. That's other. We don't do that with each other. We not. That's the abject. The fear that you get. You cannot place something within a category. So that leads me to my claim. The Japanese contemporary horror media both sexualizes and objectifies the female via the object. However, this can provide women with newfound identity and empowerment. So some of my methodologies on this field school, most of it was material observation. A lot of it was actually aesthetics for my female identity portion of my claim. A lot of women were dressed in not horrific, I guess. Yeah, just very alternative clothing. They'd wear shirts with like teddy bears and they were like mutilated, or they would wear, I think it's called like kawaii goth or cute goth, and they would wear, they'd combine the cutesy element of Japan, more and more the sense of style that they were identifying with. Also contemporary media like manga and anime, store products. There were a few galleries I went to and they were selling like Japanese horror merch. And it was also centered around female characters, like Tomie, Ringu, Sara, like a bunch of those ones. I also visited some various sites like Aokigahara, which is the suicide forest. Fuji-Q, it's a great amusement park. However, they had this huge haunted house there, really, really cool. And then I conducted some interviews and such with a foreigner group in Japan. Shout out to Miguel O'Hara from Spider-Man 2099, who got us our contacts in Japan. If you want to know more about that, you can ask me later. So here's some case studies that we're going to go over because apparently I was way more prepared for this presentation than I thought. And so we're going to talk about Tomie, Mikasa, Nani, and Midori really quickly. Here's some pictures of them. We'll come back to those. Okay, so let's talk Tomie. So she was acknowledged in this book by Junji Ito, this anthology, that she's not just a subject, she's a theme. And she's a theme of the monstrous feminine, which she goes into after this artist murders her for being too beautiful. And so Tomie was part of the abject because she's uncanny, she's too perfect, she's too beautiful. And that made men so obsessive over her that the only way to escape that obsessiveness was to kill her. And so her ugliness, after she has been found out, like after she's been murdered, she also places herself back together again to restart this cycle. That's also abject. She's now undesirable. No one wants to mess with her. Yada, yada. Mikasa and Annie are from a popular anime. The highlights of Mikasa is that she's a powerful female character, but she is a powerful female character for a male character. So she is in the abject, but she's oftentimes saved from being labeled the abject because she does everything for this male character. Annie, on the other hand, is the main antagonist of this anime, and she shares a lot of similarities with Mikasa in their characteristics, but she doesn't have like a male best friend. She doesn't have a boyfriend, she's on her own, there is no male influence, and she's almost the exact same as Mikasa. So she's part of the abject because there's no male assistance. Finally, this is the story of Miuri. She's an innocent girl taken into a freak show, and the freak show itself is abject. We label it as a freak and therefore other. There's plenty of characters in this freak show that are abusing her sexually, physically, and she's brought into the abject and is never taken back out of it. Yeah, I wish I had more time to go into that, but I don't. So, this is my conclusion that I'm just going to read for you. To fear women is a violation of the innate laws of determined societal roles. To be a woman is to be nurturing, kind, and elegant in appearance. When these forms of identity are rejected in any capacity, the female becomes a threat to the social order and finds refuge in the abject. The abjects of Japanese social, cultural, and moral norms are utilized by both men and women to create a female identity that serves to satisfy desire. I argue that abjection is a way to reclaim female identity in the male-dominated alternative realm, which will always serve the male gaze's purpose of sexualization and objectification. Malo pito, arigatou gozaimashita, and thank you.
And malo alpito, Sydney. All right, our last presenter for tonight, also from Japan. Brooke Ashley Robison. Her presentation is Community and Ritual, Exploring Methods of Community Making Within Japanese Social Organization.
Click on the second slide. Oh, no.
Hi, I'm Brooke Robison, and yeah, I had the opportunity to conduct my research in Tokyo, Japan this past summer. And my research focused on community and ritual, exploring methods of community making within Japanese social organizations. Now, when I first came to Japan, I was very determined to study the environmentalist movement that was occurring over there, which led to me working closely with a lot of trash pickup organizations. And my first experience with the Omotesando Green Bird organization kind of led me to begin to understand the purpose for these organizations that were within a city that is world-renowned as litterless and clean. There were swaths of litter underneath the bushes and the planters hidden under benches. And for this reason, I tended to linger behind the group as it moved forward to try to clear the area of this litter. And this led to me being frequently and gently chastised by the leader of the Omotesando team, as he told me to stop doing what I thought was the purpose of Greenbird, of clearing the area of trash, and to instead stay with the group and preserve that unity of the group. Now, what is Greenbird? Greenbird quickly became the central focus and took up the lion's share of the research that I conducted in Japan. It is a volunteer trash pickup organization based that started in Harajuku in 2003 and has since multiplied to many teams across Japan and internationally. And its system is very simple. Volunteers meet for 1 hour, they walk together in a group, and they pick up trash around the block. Now, the more that I participated in Greenbird, the more I noticed a disparity between what I was told was the relationship with volunteerism in Japanese culture, which was basically that the Japanese people who were working did not volunteer. And this was not what I saw in Greenbird, as I saw frequent and repetitive and enthusiastic participation in these events. This led me to question the success and ubiquity of Greenbird across Japan, and led me to change my understanding of Greenbird from an environmentalist organization into a catalyst of social creation and community making, which led to my two main research questions of what are the motivation of Greenbird participants and how does Greenbird successfully create community? the methodology that I employed throughout my research. I focused a lot on participation. I had the opportunity to participate in 4 different teams or locations in Greenbird. And across the 2 months that I was in Japan, I participated in 11 events. And during these events, I conducted informal interviews with the participants. This included understanding their motivations, their backgrounds, who they were, to the best of my ability that I could with the language and barrier in place. I also conducted a handful of semi-formal interviews, both with leaders from non-Greenbird organizations and leaders and participants of the Greenbird organization. And I also had the opportunity to participate in 5 events from the non-Greenbird trash pickup organization, Tokyo River Friends, which was headed by an expatriate American. Ask me more about that. I don't talk a lot about it in this, but cool stuff. Anyway. The 2 terms that I'd like to define before we go on is first ritual, which for the purpose of this study is defined as pattern behavior that puts normative pressure on the participants, or in other words, repeated actions that are enforced either directly or indirectly through the organization. And community, or a sense of connection to a concrete set of co-present others, or shared identity grounded on a set of norms, values, and behaviors, or put more simply, a created connection and shared identity based on shared values, experiences, etc. Now, as I looked through my data that I collected in Japan, there were 2 results that 2 themes that kept reemerging. The first of these being the 2 definitions of community that seem to underscore all of the participant motivations and the actions of Greenbird. And the rituals that I observed in each event that seem to contribute to this community making that seem to be a priority in the Greenbird organization. Now, these 2 definitions of community, for lack of a better term, I will be referring to them as micro community and macro community. They can both be found in this mission statement that is found on the Greenbird website. This first bolded statement kind of highlights the idea of micro community, or the insular community between the members of the Greenbird organization. And it says, all you need to do is have the mindset that it's uncool to pollute the city. This is in reference to how to become a member of Greenbird. And as you can see, it de-emphasizes the idea of action and emphasizes the idea of a community shared mindset and value system, which creates a connection between the members of Greenbird, which is that micro insular community. And the second is the macro community, which is highlighted in the second bold statement, to make the town we live in even prettier and cooler. And in this case, this emphasizes the Greenbird desire to establish connection between the members of Greenbird and their larger, more broader community, meaning the town and the city, the nation within which they are acting. So for micro community, it wasn't only present in the intentions of Greenbird that are stated on the website, but it was also present in the stated motivations and the observed actions of the participants and leadership of Greenbird. For example, I had the opportunity to talk to Ren, who is the leader of the Kabukicho chapter of Greenbird. And when I asked him what the purpose of Greenbird was, he told me that it was communication, gesturing between the 2 of us, suggesting the importance of this connection between individuals participating in and coming to Greenbird. And Kenji, who is the acting president of Greenbird, he told me, as I asked him about starting a Utah division here, he told me that the most important thing is to get people, lots and lots of people. Macro community was also very present in their motivations and the experiences which they shared with me. One example is my friend Akihito, who he was a very active participant in the Kabukicho chapter, but he lived over 30 minutes away and he came to every single activity. And he told me that why he came to Greenbird was because, to me, it's like, because Greenbird cleans, my home is clean. And specifically in this statement, the word home serves kind of an important connotative definition and emphasis, because it establishes this intimate and deep connection to the place in which he's acting as a Greenbird participant. even though that is not where he lives, it's not where he goes, which suggests that the action of participating in Greenbird creates that connection to the macro community in which he's acting. So how is this community, this shared social identity being established? It is through ritual, which many of which I observed in my time participating in Greenbird events. I'll go through a couple of these examples. The first being uniforms. As you can see, Greenbird likes to employ these little green vests, green gloves, little Greenbird tongs. And this use of uniform serves to demarcate the members of Greenbird specifically as members of the Greenbird organization, creating belonging, creating unity, creating this insular community space with which they can gain responsibility over the space as Greenbird volunteers. Also, the collective movement, which I mentioned in my vignette, is heavily emphasized in Greenbird activities. The effective experience of moving together creates this physical sense of unity and together. So Greenbird's success stems primarily from its mission, the creation of community ties with structure with functions within the bounds of its cultural context. This community making is accomplished through the use of organized rituals, and I believe that this study, by better understanding the success of Greenbird as it acts within Japanese institutional society, we can better understand Japan's social need, which is being fulfilled successfully due to Greenbird's participation, and also how the creation of sociality within specific cultural contexts is successful within those contexts.
Well done, Brooke. Good, Sydney? All right, let's go ahead, 10 minutes of Q&A. All right. Brandon?
These were both very amazing presentations. Thank you guys. My question is actually for Brooke. You mentioned that you did find that particular fund. I'm just really curious if this organization was similar to Greenbird in the way that the community and belonging was more important than actually picking up all the trash, or if that was more exclusive to Greenbird.
Yeah, so that was actually an interesting part of my research, because Tokyo River Friends it wasn't very, like there was one Japanese participant. The rest of the participants were expatriates from various countries. And so what I observed in that was that while community was definitely a part of the organization, the emphasis was more on actually picking up trash in the space. They definitely emphasized that over organization, which is why I found Greenbird interesting as kind of an example of this as a social institution over an environmental organization.
I have a question for Sydney. This is a long question, but there I am. So crimes against children and women have existed forever. And in the last century, media has been created and become so prevalent in our society. And the crimes of, against women and children, and then the sexualization and objectification in media enable each other. But do you think more so the crimes enable the media or the media enables them? Sorry, that's a weird question.
This is a age-old question of does art imitate life or does life imitate art? I think the best answer is that they definitely do feed off of each other. I can't say for sure which one was the instigator. I would say crime was definitely there first, and then replicating that. It would be insane. I think all of us, when we watch horror films, in our minds are not like, oh, I'm gonna go do this now, but there are crazy people. I would say I'd be pretty confident in saying that crime influences the creation of horror media rather than the other way around.
Thank you. Very nice. Brooke, that was a terrific catapulting or pivoting vignette. Just really nicely done. I was wondering how much of that is your read on what he was saying? How much is that he said to you, stop doing what you think it's I mean, is that straight up direct quote? Because if so, that's awesome, but also for being able to notice that and pivot on that, that's terrific.
Yeah, so he didn't say stop cleaning up trash. It was mostly him just calling out to stay with the group.
Yeah,
But
really nicely done.
thank you.
You see what I mean? That you were able to, he's saying, don't do this that you think you're supposed to do. It, yeah, really nice. Sydney, really good paper. I appreciate the treatment of clowns. This is what clowns are for. This is what they do. This is why and when and how and where they perform what they do. Like, you want a nice experience of this, sometime look up, as if Ronald McDonald now isn't scary enough. Look up, first Willard Scott, the weatherman, that's first Ronald McDonald. It's terrifying. But here's the thing is, the abject, I think about the way these fold into each other, circle around it. The abject is also, almost by definition, the sacred. Two becoming one flesh, the union in any religion between the divine and the humane, that is the sacred also. And this makes me think of Maya's presentation and learning, growing. There simply is not, learning simply does not exist without reversals and deviations and difficulties and challenges. So Christian's question has to, it must be asked, how can it be better? But it can never, it must also never be finally answered, because then just fold everything up and go home. In fact, the horror and dealing with the horror and figuring out how that works, and learning, and the difficulties that come with learning, the difficulties aren't challenges. That is the learning. Do you think that the abject horror you're talking about is that a sort of tumorous growth of these principles? Is it just an expression of them? Is it becoming its own thing? Do you see it tying into sort of substructure of what it means to live and how you live?
I think that it truly is becoming like its own kind of thing, or being recognized as its own thing, because as you were saying, like the sacred part of it, that was part of my realization with female identity, was that they were used, like a lot of female Japanese consumers were taking that and using it as a way to make themselves almost untouchable. Like,
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah.
yeah, and so I do think that it's kind of, it can kind of split. If it is tumorous, it can split into two different categories, to where it's like catapulting, you know, the traditional sexualization, objectification part of it, but it also is branching off and becoming maybe something a little more personal, or a little more sacred, I guess.
That was kind of my question on it, is there some sort of like polysemiotic dimension to this, where the objectification of women is doing one thing for men and a different thing for women, or one thing for particular types of men and a different thing for particular types of women? In other words, it's not a thing that means one thing, right? That it actually is semiotically open to these possibilities, and maybe that's one of the benefits of it. I don't know. Like in your description of the audience and their reactions, like you got into that a little bit, but I wonder if you experienced kind of different people, so that like the claim that, you know, empowerment via objectification for everyone, is it making a statement, or is it sort of like strategically semiotically open to multiple interpretations?
Yeah, so it was really hard for me to narrow down, because it really did feel like the majority, the majority where there's like 10,000 other different kind of interpretations of what the abject means to other people. But I sorry, could you rephrase, like?
Well, I'm just wondering if you got any dimension in your ethnographic unpacking of this, could you see people interpreting it in different ways? And I guess it's also a question about your claim. At what level is your claim operating? That one possible interpretation for certain types of people is that the objectification of women is about empowerment? Or are you arguing that that's the overarching, it's a kind of heavy-handed thing where that's what's really going on and you should really see it that way, not just for certain sorts of people?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable saying that it is an overarching thing. I don't think it's as noticeable as like the sexual element and objectification element is for most people to see. But the main consumers of Japanese horror, like the readers and the watchers, are women. And so obviously there's something going on there to why they're consuming it. And as a horror fan myself and as a woman, I also feel like I view myself, like I like horror because it's raunchy. It makes me feel like I can do things that, like, not that I'm gonna go kill somebody, but like if I wanted to, like, like I'm joining the men, right? You know, and then there's the concept of the final girl, like Western horror, where they feel like that is an empowering kind of archetype for them. So I think that on a subconscious level, I would be comfortable saying most female women probably relate to these characters at the very least. Yeah.
That it's contained transgressiveness. I mean, in other words, it reminds me of Tahina's, at least what I was suggesting with the hula. 2 million hula participants in Japan just blew me away. And I thought Tahina's conclusion was great. But I wonder also if there's this adopting of something that you can already be feminine if you're Japanese. But if you watch horror, or maybe if you dance hula, you're also bringing in this you're amping up your and tweaking how you can be feminine.
If I could ask one more to Brooke, if that's okay. I was wondering about the actual like logistics of this, like who brings the team jerseys and the gloves and all the implements? Is that something you buy yourself to kind of mark your insiderness to this? Or is there sort of like team leaders that bring them all and they collect them all at the end? And the reason that strikes me as potentially significant is like, just looking at some of your quotes, I guess I'm just kind of wondering like a level deeper, like people wanting to connect with the community and build a community. Is that potentially because of a felt disconnect with community? Something like Durkheim's anomie, where people within modernity are feeling like they're becoming increasingly isolated and don't feel like they have that communitas, and this is a place for them to get that. And maybe I'm totally off the mark, but I'm just wondering about some of these sort of like gritty details about how this stuff actually happens and what that might say about what these people are really getting out of this.
Yeah, so it's actually, it's a very organized kind of program, which is kind of also important to it as well, because if the Japanese society is organized as well. And I think that's part of it. But what to your second point, what you were saying about they're like seeking this community because it's something that they're lacking. That was something that I did observe in the people that I spoke to. Many of them lived alone and did not seem to have family around, were very isolated. Tokyo itself is very famously populous. And so I do think that that was a factor in their participation, that they were seeking this social need that they had because of the circumstances of the community that they lived in.
So the events were 1 hour, but did those social connections made on social media or other social spheres beyond the hour? Or was it you show up and you never see these people except for the next time we get together as an hour?
Yeah, so that's actually something I wish I would have been able to talk about more. There's one aspect specifically with the Kabukicho division was that they had after parties. I went to one of them, and all of the people at the table who were talking and laughing like friends, they had all met directly through Greenbird, and they hadn't known each other before. And I sat next to one man specifically, who this was his first time at the after party, and people were reaching out, asking questions, interrupting the conversation in order to include him. So I do think that there is kind of the idea of crossing the boundary of Greenbird. But I also, with one of my informants, Akito, he had a friend, Arata, who, they were good friends. They followed each other on Instagram and they met up at the Greenbird events, but they said that they didn't do anything outside of the events. So I think there were both sides of that, but there also was the effort in some of the teams to create the social connections outside of the Greenbird space.
Okay, we have one last final question for the evening. Oh, someone have their hand up there?
You too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And we'll have one of our own ask the last final question. Go ahead.
Rookie, I was gonna ask, you mentioned that the after parties happened in Kabukicho, and I am just really curious if that had anything to do with Kabukicho's particular vibe. And if Kabukicho, just, you know, to reiterate, Kabukicho is the red light district of Tokyo. And so I'm just curious if the after parties were like if the Greenbird Kabukicho district was more so known for this sociality, like if it was stronger in the Kabukicho centers, especially, you know, because of the influencing area. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I would say absolutely. Every team definitely had its own personality, depending on the space that it was in. While they all had similar like structures, how they organize things. The quote that I used here from Ren, he's the leader of the Kabukicho, and he was very, his emphasis was definitely on communication, on bringing people together, and they actually got an award to have the highest participation across Greenbird. So there was definitely a specific personality.
Like, did you notice were people like quicker to move on kind of from the picking up trash? Like, was it more just like really focused on community in the sense that they kind of forgot about the trash, or, you know, because that's also one of the highest trash areas too, you know, so.
I would say I noticed both. They were definitely picking up trash, and there was also a lot of just talking, walking together. Yeah, I don't know specifically if it was much different than the other teams that I observed, because they all had that element of, you know, socializing and picking up trash and being together. So yeah, it's a good question, but I wouldn't say I noticed like something that was super noticeable between these.
All right, thank you, girls. Thank you very much. It's almost 8 o'clock and we need to wrap up and go home and rest. Can I ask the presenters, tonight's presenters, can you please come up here just real quickly? Just tonight's presenters. Hey, let's give them a big hand. I know the rest of our audience are still here tonight. Thank you. You all did a wonderful, wonderful job tonight. Can I also ask the other half of this wonderful class to join them up here?
Yeah,
perfect.
There's actually, yes, get a little closer so they can take pictures.
Yeah.
Do the story. Hear that, Lauren? Everyone can see Lauren.
Okay. Oh, wait, I'll do a heart. Yeah.
Lynette, get in there.
Lynette, get the.
Sorority squad. 1, 2, 3. Yay!
Okay, if I could just have, no, stay up there, please. If I could just have one more minute, please. I'm not asking any questions. We had a lot of great questions last night and tonight, but for our, the rest of our friends and families, and of course, faculties who are still here tonight, can I say thank you to all of you first for being here. This makes this evening and yesterday so worthwhile that our students are able to present their work to their families and friends, and especially our faculties. Thank you, Greg, Jacob, Paul, Dr. Chase, who was here. All four of them were here both nights, guys. Let's thank them. Yeah, they had a long day, and so did you, and to sit through 2 evenings, because our class was large, we had to split into 2 evenings, and
It was a delight.
and I want to thank you. I want our faculties to know that, I don't know if you noticed, but all 15 of our students were here both nights. Even the ones that were not, that presented yesterday, they were all here tonight supporting them. And this is why it's so difficult to say goodbye and end this semester with such a great group of students. And I just got emotional standing back there as I just saw their heads. They all sat here uniformly, like what primary, and watched and listened and supported each other. And that's what makes it so difficult to leave you. Rufus, I thought our class last semester was, I didn't think anyone could beat our class, Rufus, but no, it's hard to compete against.
It's planted.
Thank you. Thank you for the privilege of working alongside you. And the beauty of teaching this class is that you are actually the teacher. You're teaching me and your research and your travels and all the things. It's so foreign to me. I have no idea. And so throughout the whole semester, they have been teaching me, and I'm walking away. I'm better for it. And I know that I'm comforted to know that all 15 of you, well versed in anthropology studies and your interest in people and society, that's what it's all about. And it is an honor to be with you. So thank you. Great job. Yeah, that's all.
We're not the only ones that were here both nights and at every class, and we're definitely not the teachers for this class. That's you, Professor Finau, and thank you so much for everything you've done for us, for teaching us how to structure our thesis and helping us to make these great claims from what we did this summer. So thank you so much.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. We did it on time. Good night, everybody. Drive safe home.